everyone. This is Bob West. I'm managing partner with West Strategy Group, and I'm here with Shannon Rowbury. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about the medalist mindset and what it means to the business world. Appreciate your joining us, Shannon. Why don't you do the honors and tell people who you are?
Excellent. Thanks, Bob. I'm Shannon Rowbury. My background is in professional athletics. So I competed professionally for about 15 years, was Nike sponsored, and continue to work with them as a ambassador and consultant in the women's vertical. And throughout my athletic career in track and field, I competed in 3 Olympics. I was fourth at the Rio Olympic final and set some American records, a world record, and earned 2 bronze medals at the World Championships, as well as a gold medal in a relay World Championship. So had a really long career in professional sports. And probably what I'm most proud about is my consistency in it. And what we're going to talk about for Medalist Mindset is really a distillation of those kind of athlete sports performance tools that help Olympians succeed and how they can be leveraged in the business space to optimize performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And just building on what Shannon is saying, she was ranked in the top 10 in the world for 10 straight years, which is very rare in track and field. So, in addition to all of her other accolades, amazing career. So, let me tell you a little bit about my background. I took the logical path from being a German major to technology and then cybersecurity. I've only worked in security since 1995, so I'm hoping that I'll learn about it at some point. I've had 3 CISO experiences, the experience being I think the very broad descriptor. I've done consulting with Deloitte, E&Y on my own, and I've had 2 product roles, most recently with Palo Alto Networks. I was on the Prisma Cloud leadership team. And Shannon and I started working together December 1. And we talk about leadership quite a bit. And this is one of those times. And, I think one of the things that I found interesting in our conversations is the commonalities in between Olympians and people like myself that have spent their career in the business world. So, like anything, we need to tell a good story, and it'd be great to tell people about your background, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I think I'd love to share the origin story of us working together because we are co-founders and managing partners at West Strategy Group, which is a newer business built on decades of experience. So I met Bob in 2017. Bob is, amongst his many things he does, a board member for USA Track and Field Foundation. And so when we met in 2017, I was still competing as a professional athlete. And what started as a friendship based on a lot of common interests, running being one of them, but also, family background, my husband being from Mexico and Bob, your mom being also from Mexico. Just a lot of things that we really related to. And that friendship evolved into a mentorship as I transitioned out of professional competition and into a career in sports tech. And it was during that transition phase that Bob and that we started working together, doing talks, doing fireside chats, having conversations around the similarities between Olympic athletes and CISOs, the topic being these similarities between high achievers and what, when you're trying to succeed at the highest level, there's certain attributes and certain traits in common. And then also what we speak to in Medalist Mindset, there's certain behavioral patterns that you can start to embody to then have that success. And so, those conversations paired with some of my other keynote work that I had been doing around my Olympic experience led me about a little over a year ago to sit down and really try to distill those key points into a more actionable workbook and webinar learning leadership series so that we could help professionals translate those sports performance tools into that business space. And so the culmination was this little workbook we've got here and the keynotes and the workshops that we do. But really, it grew out of these just natural and organic synergies between the two of us.
Yeah, and just as additional context, I've gone through three leadership programs in my career. I worked with Bank One, one of J.P. Morgan Chase's predecessor banks. I went through Fifth Third Bank's leadership program and the Disney Leadership Institute, and they're all fine programs. This one I think is really, really interesting in looking at success from a track and field perspective and high achieving success in the Olympics and everything else. And there's so many applicable lessons from the sports world. So, for example, I've competed, certainly not at Shannon's level, but this is my 51st year of running, which is kind of crazy. Um, and one of the things that I've done, and I know Shannon has done before racing, is visualization. So
Mm-hmm.
I will, for example, walk through a marathon in my head before I run it, so I know what my time goal is, and then when if I know what the destination is, then I start walking through. So I'll think, here's where I am at mile one. This is my time. Here's who's around me. Here's the conditions. I'm programming myself to feel good at that point, and then just go through that progressively. And a really substantial percentage of success is the mentality that you bring to the table and the level of confidence that you have. And when I started at Bank One, my bosses sat me down after a few months and said, we think you have potential to be on the leadership team. And so we put together a 3-year development plan for me. And one of the things that I did throughout the process for a couple minutes on a day-to-day basis is visualize what was it like sitting in my boss's office. What did it look like? What did it feel like? What was he doing? So when I got to that level, I already knew what I needed to do in addition to the development that I had. I think one of the things that I find interesting about you, Shannon, is the journey that you took into becoming a professional track and field athlete, which is non-traditional. So, Shannon, if you could give the audience a little bit of background on that journey.
Yeah, I never wanted to be an athlete, which is crazy to say considering that I've spent pretty much all of my adult life involved with sports. For me, as I grew up in the 80s and 90s, there were incredible athletes that I could watch on television, but none of them looked like me. They were NFL, NBA, MLB, and I was inspired by them, but because I could never, they were all men's sports and I couldn't be in that, I kind of wrote off athlete as a possible future. But every 4 years, I would see the Olympics on TV and I would see these incredible women achieving human feats of excellence. And so while I never wanted to be an athlete, I knew I wanted to be great at something. And I saw the Olympics as this inspiration of what might be possible. Of course, I was a kid and I was way far from that ever being a reality. But I think for me, I was really focused in on this idea of I wanted to be the best in the world at something. And I didn't know as a kid what that path would look like, but I was really motivated by trying to achieve a high level of success. And part of the process of getting to that high level of success was trying to have self-awareness around areas where I both had the natural ability, but also the interest and passion to put in the work, right? Because I had the blessing from my parents growing up that they would always say, do what you love and success will find you. And that was something that kind of came back into my life again and again throughout the years when I was making hard decisions. But that was always paired with the expectation that the hard work would be put in there as well, right? And so if you want to be great at something, I think at the outset, accepting that you're going to have to work your butt off to get to that level of success is really important. And I think, I want to go back to what you were saying about that visualization and that idea of understanding where you wanted to go in the future. Because I think, so much of it is, at the outset, really having clarity on what your goal is, right? If you if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know what is your North Star, how are you ever going to get there? You might get there by accident or happenstance, but the odds are a lot less likely. But if you can identify, and I didn't know I wanted to be an Olympian per se. I knew kind of I like to describe it as like, if this is the world of opportunities, this big pie, I knew I wanted to maybe head in like this direction, right? So having a sense of like the area you're trying to reach, the target you're trying to go after, and then you're building a plan on how to get there. But it really does start with that clarity around what your goal is. And then if you're able to verbalize that goal, it's a lot more likely too that you'll be able to bring others on board in the process.
Yeah, and I really like what you're saying, Shannon. It's really analogous to strategic planning in business because ultimately you have to figure out what your destination is. So when I've been in my roles, and Shannon and I put together a 3-year strategic plan when we started West Strategy Group, and it all starts in terms of what do you want to be when you grow up. And by the way, that's Dream, my strategic advisor. You know, she's much smarter than me, so I'm glad that she's sitting right next to me.
We were hoping
Um,
she'd make a cameo.
oh, that's right. That's right. Hey, sweetie. And so when you know the destination, then you can start putting together the steps that it takes to get there. To Shannon's point, if you don't know what the destination is, you can't build a roadmap to get there. And so that's really foundationally, one of the things that's really important to do on the onset, whether it's for you personally or for your department or your company. It's all really logical steps. And building on that, Shannon, I think the medalist mindset that you and Lauren Gibbs put together, I think applies universally, right? Whether it's at a personal level, at a business level, and I think it'd be good to let people know the core elements of the medalist mindset.
Yeah. So it's 5 key points, 5 keys to this medalist mindset. And really, it kind of takes you through a process of that internal alignment and orientation at first, right? So the first section is goals, and how do you have clarity on your North Star and what it is, or at least the destination you think you want to reach. As you were speaking, it made me think we set these goals, and there needs to be assessments along the way, right? So like you've said, you and I created our 3-year strategic plan, but in building it, we then worked our way backwards and started setting in check-ins and assessments so that we could, tweak as we needed along the way, but we're still heading towards that ultimate destination. So there's the goal setting at the outset, and that's kind of that first internal step. The second and third internal step are foundation and mind. And foundation and mind are really all about, for foundation, we talk about it as prehab, right? So what are the things that constantly get in your way when you're trying to go after a goal, or in your daily life? What is something that just is a chafing point? And being really self-aware about that and taking the time and committing yourself to trying to address that at the outset. If you know that this thing keeps popping up and becoming a problem point, what better way to increase your chance of success than to address it early, and try to eliminate it as a variable if possible. And if it's not possible to eliminate, at least mitigate its impact. The third is mind, and that is very much about when chaos happens, and it will happen, how do you control the controllables? What within your sphere of influence can you impact to continue to move the process forward? And that prehab and controlling the controllables, foundation and mind, those are tied together. But it is at the outset, those first 3 steps of that internal directional facing and that internal self-awareness and goal setting around what is important to you. The 4th and 5th keys are routine and team. So we have these goals, but we can't exist in a vacuum. We don't exist in a vacuum. And if we want to achieve great things in the world, we have to take them out into the world. And so the idea around routine is it's still a personal choice, but it's or personal choices and impacted by yourself personally, but what is the routine you want to set for yourself on a day-to-day basis so that you can be increasing the likelihood of success. And part of that is, let me assess my current routine and see if it's serving you well, right? Just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it has to be the same in the future. And the fifth key is team. The same thing goes there, right? You are going to need a team around you to achieve a big goal. And the importance of having that team audit and really, first of all, are the people in your team ones that will support and encourage your success, or might try to pull you away from that goal you've set? And furthermore, if those people are no longer supportive, if those people are getting in the way of your success, it's important to also have that team audit where some relationships have a certain lifespan. Hopefully you don't have to have too many ends of relationships, but understanding some relationships have an end of lifespan, or other ones you just need to have an updated conversation so that they can be aware of where you're at. And I think that team component is so important as well, because once you get through the end of the process and you go after a goal, that team becomes your first line of defense when a setback happens. They're the ones that are going to kind of huddle around you as you make a plan for how to deal with any adversity or setback that may occur. And it becomes this sort of flywheel process where you have a challenge along the way. Your team is your first line of defense, and then you're going back through, okay, what's our goal? What could we prehab? What did we learn that we can take moving forward, and so on. So that is an overview of Medalist Mindset, kind of an overview of those 5 steps, the internal to external progression. And really it's set up to be a tool for our clients, for participants in our workshop to, in work and in life, kind of create more clarity and more purposeful action in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense, and wanted to dig into a couple of topics a little bit more. When you think of building a team in a corporation, if you have B players, it's going to be much harder to execute than you have A players, right? So when I step into roles, I always do a talent assessment on the front end to understand who has the capability, who has the right personality, who has the internal drive to be part of the team. Are they a good fit from a cultural perspective? And the more diligence that you do and the more action you take up front, then you're going to be that much more successful along the journey. And I'm sure, Shannon, when you think of your coaches and your psychologists and everyone else, your physios, you've got to have the best people around you to be successful, or as successful as you can be. The other thing I wanted to dig into, and Shannon would love to get the story about you. One of the most important things is that to understand is that success isn't linear, right? No matter what it is that you're going after, you're going to have setbacks, whether they're big or small. And the most important thing is how you manage those setbacks. So Shannon, one of the things that we talk about regularly is your early days in your professional career. And I think it goes back to your college days where you had your physical issues.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. This idea of success isn't linear. And even as you were talking about that team around you, right? The controlling the controllables. Sometimes you're in a work environment where we can't control who's our boss or who we have to work with. And I've had my fair share of not great bosses, coaches, whatever it might be. But having that clarity around, okay, if I'm going to stay in this, why am I staying in it? What am I trying to get out of it? How do I manage the situation in a way that is tolerable, or do I leave to find something better? But I think so much of it comes down to the perspective that we take, the mindset that we take, right? I'm definitely, full disclosure, a glass half full kind of person. And so I believe that things happen for a reason, even when it makes no sense at the time. I I think part of it is for like my task. I see it as my task to figure out what that reason is and put in the work to make the best outcome of whatever lemons I might have been given. And one story I share is, or share often, in 2007, it was my last season as a collegiate athlete. I'd just come off winning NCAA indoors, got second an hour and a half later in a second event. So it was a huge competition for me. I was on top of the world. And the day after, I started noticing a little soreness in my left hip, which about a month and a half later led to me being diagnosed with a stress fracture in my left femoral neck, which for many is a career-ending injury. And this was '07. So 2008 Olympic trials were very much, I was about 1 year out from those. And I was signing a professional athletic contract, walking around on crutches. But in my, you know, a couple ways that I handled it after the initial cry and tears, which I think it's important to give ourselves. We always say in the sporting world, give yourselves, 24 hours. If it's a bad race or a bad workout, you can have 24 hours to feel it. And then you got to get up and you got to just get back into the routine and start putting one step in front of the other, to just keep moving towards, what you want to achieve. For me, one of the steps that I took was this idea of prehab, which, in the corporate space, we got quite the kitty cat friend.
The story is so compelling, Dream has to listen in.
Yeah. This idea of root cause analysis is in the sporting world what we would call prehab. And for me, with that injury that could have ended my career in '07, I really took that as an invitation to explore, not just put a band-aid on the injury and try to move forward as fast as possible, but instead to figure out why the heck this happened in the first place. And so, from a sport context, that included getting assessed by, or getting a bone length scan, getting assessed by a chiropractor, a orthopedic doctor. Well, first I had the MRI that showed the injury, and then going to these specialists, from those specialist recommendations, trying to understand what the injury was caused from. Ultimately, for me, it was a leg length difference of 7 millimeters, which seems insignificant, but added up over thousands of miles. That kind of misalignment had become a huge problem. And so, then once I understood the source of the problem, I had to figure out how I could start to address it. And I could never change the length of my bones, but I could get orthotics to kind of lessen that leg length discrepancy. I could create a exercise routine that would strengthen my hip and core so that my first line of defense muscularly was strong and would reduce the risk of that bone misalignment. And then, other steps as well. But ultimately, once I had done those steps and making that plan, then it was up to me to execute on it diligently day after day. And really, ensure that I was taking those prehab actions as well as all the other training that I needed to do to try to build myself up toward my goal of making an Olympic team. And yeah, one of the fun stories that I speak on in my keynote and the video that I get to show is sort of the outcome of that, which was not just making the team, but really dominating the competition just 1 year after this injury that should have ended my career. And so, that's where this idea of prehab, this idea of controlling the controllables, that kind of perspective that you take where everyone's trying to tell you you're out of it, but your self-belief and your willingness to work tells you otherwise, and drives you forward.
Yeah. Well, so while you were talking, Dream, my strategic advisor here was whispering in my ear. And number one, what a freaking awesome story. But secondly, she wanted me to remind you that in the category of small worlds, the 2008 Olympic trials was the first trials that I attended and spectated at. And I remember that race so well, both the men's and women's 1500. But yours in particular, I think it was it was right in the last backstretch on right before the bell lap. You just pulled ahead in
Yeah.
200 meters, uh, you just dominated that race so well. Um, and what your story reminds me of is one of my business experiences. So I worked at Bank One for close to 6 years, joined as a security architect. I had 5 roles in the 6 years that I was there, and my most senior role was Chief Information Security Officer for the retail bank. And one of the reasons that Shannon and I work together so well is our internal drive and really ability to focus on our goals. So over the years that I was at Bank One, I always got the highest rating on my reviews and everything else. And my boss left in the last year, and his replacement brought in his leadership team. I wasn't part of it, so I was liberated from my role. And I remember, first of all, hearing the news on whatever morning that was. I think it was January 6th of 2003, but who really
Not that
remembers
it's
that
not
stuff?
that it's like seared into your brain or
No, no,
anything.
it's kind of blurry. But
Yeah.
I just, first of all, remember a sense of panic.
Hmm.
And, to your point in terms of, absorbing and going through the emotions, that day was the day to go through it. And then the next
Hmm.
morning, I woke up and made a list of all the people that I knew, both within the bank and externally. As luck would have it, one of my colleagues went to Fifth Third Bank and they didn't have a CISO at the time, a Chief Information Security Officer. So he introduced me to the bank, and I went over to Fifth Third, and so that's where I had my first CISO role. And I contrast that with the really bad news that I received on January 6th of '03.
Hmm.
I would never have been able to get, or it certainly would have taken me much longer to get to the CISO title if I had stayed at Bank One, and ultimately was
Hmm.
a really good foundation for everything else. And it just reminds me of your experience when you found out you had your stress fracture in your hip, that I'm sure the world felt like it was collapsing around you, but there was the analysis that you did, and then ultimately
Hmm.
figured out, how can I prevent this from happening again? And that's really one of the things that you need to think about. There's a lot of things that you don't control, but in the
Hmm.
world, in the area where you can, that's where you really need to focus your energies. Um,
Right.
so Shannon, as we wrap up, do you have any words of wisdom?
I think just your story, my story, it reminds me just how much, as humans, we're all wired, like we all are wired the same. We all have goals and desires, we have needs. And I think that the idea with Medalist Mindset is not, we're not trying to tell you what is right for you. We're trying to help you think, think clearly in this proactive, goal oriented way, right? So giving you the tools to achieve success in whatever it might be, and take these, like we were saying at the outset, the sports performance tools that really have transformed the sporting space in the last decade or so, as athletes have leveraged them further. Because as you said, it's the main thing you can control is right between your ears. And the way that you handle a setback or a success, um, like what are you going to do next, and how you recover from that setback or success, what are you going to do next with it, and how do you hopefully enjoy the process, right, as well. So yeah, I think that to me is what's really exciting and fun about our work together, is that we don't claim to say like this is the, like we have the answer for you. We're trying to help you figure out the right answer for yourself and empower you to do your best work in this life that we're given. So I'm loving our work together. I'm loving meeting, um, you know, entering especially more deeply into the cybersecurity space, because there are so many synergies um, between those cybersecurity professionals and these high achieving athletes, and it's fun to be able to add value there.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I think, at this point in my career, it's really rewarding to help people get some benefit from my experiences.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things I hear you say regularly that your mom told you as you were growing up is, if you do what you love, then success will find you.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons I've stayed in the security space and cybersecurity for 30 years is, I just find
Hmm.
it really interesting and rewarding. And, being able to point people and organizations in the right direction is just a lot of fun. And pulling your experiences and combining them with mine, I think is really
Hmm.
powerful. So,
Yeah.
Shannon, thank you so much for spending time with me today. And thank you to
Yeah.
everyone for listening. Hope this
Yeah.
is helpful and look forward to seeing you next time.